So I have never driven a Porsche, I have never driven a Lamborghini, and I have never driven a Ferrari. And today, all of that is changing thanks to Extreme Experience. And as you can tell, I've already gone for a couple rides and I'm sweaty as a result of it. This is all thanks to Extreme Experience. They called me up and they were like, hey, you know, we can get you access to some of these really sweet cars. They flew me down to Louisiana. We are here at NOLA Motorsports Park, and we're getting to check out the Ferrari 458, Lamborghini Gallardo LP560-4. We've got the Porsche GT3, and we have the Nissan GT-R. So I'm going to take each one of them out on the track and go for a couple laps in them.
On the brakes, make the turn, all the way out, ease it in, toes on the throttle. There you go, just start rolling with that throttle more. Good. Hold the speed.
So I have now driven the Nissan GT-R. That was the first car I went in. Then I went into the Lamborghini Gallardo, and then I drove the Ferrari. And initial impressions, I think one of the biggest things you notice is you actually do notice the weight of the GT-R. I mean, that thing's a heavy hitter as far as its capability, but you do feel the weight. So somehow it's able to overcome it and do extremely well out there, but you certainly feel that weight. The car, as you're in it, you feel the whole thing kind of bobbling around. You feel the weight shifting, versus once you got into the Lamborghini, you know, the first thing I noticed was the steering felt a lot more direct in the Lamborghini, and then the car doesn't move at all. It's just your body in there moving, and the car just kind of stays planted out there. It feels amazing. And then it was kind of, you know, I don't know if it's a confidence thing, because I didn't really know what I was doing for the first two drives, and I certainly still don't know what I'm doing about to go on the fourth drive in the Porsche. But driving the Ferrari, I definitely felt the most comfortable, and it felt the easiest in the curves. And I think a lot of that was just my driving technique. I was a little too rigid in the Lamborghini and trying to overcome all these different thoughts. So it's certainly a mental challenge for me, you know, I've only been on one other track than this, driving a Corvette, and that's a whole different, you know, these are completely different animals than Corvettes, so it's certainly a level of speed I've never experienced. It's been amazing so far, and, you know, just from the cars I've driven from the Lamborghini to the Ferrari, I would say at this point, the one I've enjoyed the most is the Ferrari. I think a little bit of that bias is that I felt the most comfortable in it, but definitely the steering in both the Ferrari and the Lamborghini, you know, surprisingly light. Like, it's not a super high amount of effort, but it felt really precise in the Ferrari, and I felt in a lot of control. You know, I really felt like I had good control in the Ferrari going through those corners and, you know, modulating the steering. They were all saying that the Ferrari here has the touchiest throttle. I think I've gotten my right foot trained enough in this environment to not just punch it and spin out. Other than that, though, I mean, I'm just not giving it enough throttle from a confidence thing. It's not that, you know, it can't spin out with me driving. So it certainly can. I just kind of stay off it a little bit. But it's been amazing so far, and I look forward to driving the Porsche.
The engine and the transmission under braking actually evenly distribute over all four wheels. It really makes Porsches dynamic in braking. Yeah, there you go. Start rolling that throttle a little bit more. Good. Now we're going down to that side. 3, 2, 1. Hard brakes. Good. On the brakes. Let it come out. Nice. Very nice. Ease it in. Tighten it up.
Okay, so I've now driven all four cars, including the Porsche GT3, which I got back from, and they're absolutely incredible. I think the question people are going to ask is going to be, what did you enjoy most? And I think the difficult part of this question is the fact that I got much more confident each time I got out on the track. And so I would say, you know, if I had to pick based on the, you know, a few laps in each car, which one did I enjoy the most? I think I probably enjoyed the GT3 the most. Honestly, I thought it sounded the best. It sounds amazing. It's incredible that a V6 engine, 3.8 liters, which is pretty big for a V6 engine, is screaming all the way to 9,000 RPM, and it just sounds amazing doing it. It's got a nice, incredible noise that comes out, so I really liked that. The precision of the transmission, how quick it was just unbelievable. And I think that's the case for both the Ferrari and the GT3. And I think it'd be a very close toss-up if I were to have more experience with both cars which of those two I would pick as my favorite. I think they're very close. The Ferrari, definitely a quicker car, but I felt more comfortable, and perhaps because it didn't have quite the power in the Porsche at speed, and I felt like I could understand what was happening with those outside tires as I would corner in the Porsche a bit more than in the Ferrari. Though that said, I felt like both were unbelievable, and I think honestly the biggest difference was my confidence of just growing each time. So the longer you're out there, the better I felt about it each time. And, you know, just incredible steering. This actually does have rear wheel steering in the Porsche GT3, which is a pretty unique feature of it. I won't say that, you know, I necessarily noticed that while I was out there. It wasn't something that I actively felt, but, you know, it definitely felt very planted in the corners, and it felt like you could approach that limit and you could feel that right side or left side, you know, load up, and then you knew you were right there and you could just hold that weight, versus the Ferrari was a bit more lively. You didn't necessarily know once you were there, and you could cross over a bit more easily. So a little bit more predictable to drive in the GT3. Also the braking, which you wouldn't really expect, but in a straight line, because it's got all the weight at the back, it has really stable braking in a straight line. So it's a nice even distribution of the braking effort between the rear axle and the front axle. Now, I didn't do any trail braking really at all, and that's kind of not something they want to teach at this beginner level of driving on a track, just because, you know, people are coming at it from all experience levels. So just keep it simple, remove variables, and make it so that, you know, anybody can come out here and enjoy it. And from that perspective, you know, just braking in a straight line, the GT3 felt very planted, very good stable braking, whereas the other cars would kind of squiggle a little bit as you're going down the straight. This one was just planted, smooth, you know, very direct. So that was a difference. I imagine, you know, if you were to do some trail braking and brake hard into a corner, especially with the rear wheel steering, it might make it pretty easy for that rear end to kick out, but not something I experienced today. So, you know, it's been amazing driving all of these vehicles. And if I had to pick just based on today, you know, which car would you go back out for with another run on the track? I'd probably say the GT3, but very, very close to second, if not first, would be the 458. Both of these just amazing. And that's not to discredit at all the GT-R or the Lamborghini. And I think most of it's just the progression of confidence getting into them. They're all fantastic. The Lamborghini, you know, the shifts were a bit slower, and that was definitely something you notice. And it's kind of silly to complain about something on these kind of cars just because how capable they are, but that would be kind of the complaint there with the Lamborghini. Just you know, the slower shift times. It felt really stable, felt really great with the steering in comparison to the GT-R, which kind of just floated around a little bit. And I say float in comparison to like these other cars, which are just insanely planted, versus, you know, everyday drivers that most of us are used to. The GT-R is far more planted than you'll ever imagine. But at speed, you know, you're going down that front straightaway. Those are speeds I've never experienced in a car before. And the little bumps there, you know, are big bumps when you're going really fast because they're now bunched up together. So it did make quite a difference, you know, being in the different vehicles and how that front straightaway felt once you got at a really high speed and you're kind of bumping along there. The car kind of wobbles around in the GT-R versus, and actually in the GT3 as well, it kind of bounced around. I think the Ferrari and the Lamborghini felt a little bit more planted there on that front straightaway, a little more precise. Probably the most confident on that straightaway was the Ferrari 458, just kind of dogging it down there. And then once you got into the braking in a straight line, it got a little more squirrely, versus the Porsche was very direct and very, you know, it just braked in that exact straight line that you just pushed it in, rather than the Ferrari where you kind of have tiny corrections here and there. So thank you all for watching, and of course a huge thank you to Extreme Experience for having me out. I would definitely recommend, you know, coming in, checking out one of these experiences. They're all over the US, there are all kinds of different tracks. I'll include links in the video description and you can go check it out. And it's honestly like very affordable for what you get to do. It's an amazing event, it's amazing cars. You're on a track with just this organization. I mean, to do that on your own would be extraordinarily expensive, and they set it all up in a very easy manner. Great instructions. It's just been a really great time, and I appreciate them for having me out. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave those below.